Okay, good afternoon. It's at least afternoon for me. I don't know when you will be watching this video. So in our last video, we've been talking about data collection and instrumentation. So we tried to see what the instruments should look like and all that. Now, one of the things that really makes your study, of course, reliable, trustworthy, is this idea of validity and reliability. And the way you do validity and reliability is different for the qualitative study and also for the quantitative study. So in this part of it, we'll be looking at specifically in quantitative study, where you have designed a questionnaire, an instrument that will try to measure some kind of a construct. And you have to show whether that instrument that you have, that you're using, the questionnaire itself, whether it is valid or reliable. So we'll talk a little bit of what does it mean to be valid, what does it mean to have an instrument that is reliable. And I will post another video related with how do you check for validity and reliability when you're working with qualitative study. So I'll put that one up from YouTube. But let's talk about this one. So criteria for good measuring instruments is the idea of validity and reliability. In data collection, it is a must to select instruments that accurately measure the variables you selected for your research study. So you should have an instrument clear. Your instruments should measure the things that you actually want to measure, the variables that you're trying to measure, and it should measure it very accurately, correctly. Most of the time, faulty data analysis and faulty conclusions of research findings are the result of using wrong instruments to collect data. When your instrument is wrong, you have to get this. If your instrument is wrong, then the data that you get will be wrong. And because the data that you got is wrong, then your whole study is going to be a waste. We know people who have started not so well with the instrument, and they have gone out to collect data. And because the instrument was wrong, they couldn't do any statistical analysis on the data they had, and therefore they just had to drop. They had to be undergraduated because of that. So I would like you to be very careful in the instruments that you use. Make sure that it is valid, it is reliable, and make sure that you have different people to look at it. We'll see some of the things that we said is pilot testing it and then making sure you check for validity and reliability of it. If researchers' interpretations of data are to be valuable, the measuring instruments used to collect those data must be both valid and reliable. A wonderful research design and an excellent data analysis can yield useless results if the data quality is poor. So you may have a very good design, you may have done an excellent job in the way you have developed your proposal in all of those things, and you may even have a very good data analysis skills, but then if the data itself is not good, then the whole thing will be waste. So carefully designing and selecting the instrument that will be used to collect your data is one of the greatest responsibilities for you as a researcher. So what do we mean by validity? What this means is, does the instrument measure what it says it is going to be measuring? Does the instrument that you have, does it measure what you intend for it to be measuring? That's validity. Is it measuring what you want it to measure? An example, let me give us this construct, for example. You remember a construct is something by itself, you can't measure it, and therefore you have to operationalize it. You have to come up with different ways of measuring it. And one of the examples could be, let's say a student wants to measure the variable spiritual formation, spiritual maturity. So spiritual maturity is a construct, because you can't really measure a spiritual maturity by itself. You can't say to me, how much is your spiritual maturity? You can't. You have to ask me several questions that will help you to measure what level of spiritual maturity I have. So if the student, for example, wants to measure spiritual maturity, and operationally he defines spiritual maturity as the number of times a student attended Sunday school out of the 52 weeks. So he said, okay, I know how to measure spiritual maturity. And he says, spiritual maturity, I'm going to measure it by the number of weeks this person has gone to church, has attended church in a year. Now, what do you think about that? Can you measure spiritual maturity by the number of weeks the person has gone to church? Now, is attendance count in Sunday school a valid measure of spiritual maturity? Does count really measure spiritual maturity? If I come 52 weeks out of the 52, does it mean I am spiritually mature? Can one attend Sunday school and be spiritually immature? You know, so a person can be there 52 weeks out of 52 and be spiritually immature. Therefore, what we can see is the attendance, the number of counts, may not necessarily be a good measure the construct that he wanted to measure. Can one be spiritually mature and not necessarily attend Sunday school? That is true. It is possible. It's possible that one may not necessarily be attending Sunday school, but he can be or she can be spiritually mature. So is the proposed instrumental collect that have for spiritual maturity, is it valid? So it's not. So the questions that you have to help you measure the construct, that variable, you need to make sure that it is valid. That means it is measuring what it is intending for it to be measuring. Okay, so that's validity. Types of instrument validity, there are several of them. We'll be focusing, I'll briefly talk about the content validity. So content validity, predictive validity, concurrent validity, construct validity, all of these are different ways for checking for validity in an instrument. So looking at content validity, this is the degree to which the instrument measures an intended content area. So it's looking at the content area, content validity. It looks at your instrument, is it measuring that area correctly, adequately? So item validity is one of them under this one. Item validity, this is the extent the items are related to the area of study. So this is just like an exam, for example. You may have a final exam or you may have even a quiz. The questions in your quiz, are they questions related to the area of the study? Or did I include questions from a different area that doesn't have any relationship to the things that you have studied? So content validity, the item validity specifically has to do with, do the items in the instrument, do they relate to the area of study, each one of them? So you need to make sure that each one of them are related. Sampling validity, the extent the instrument samples the total content area being studied. So in the research method course, we have covered and we continue to cover a lot of it. So if I am to design a question for us, a quiz, does the quiz cover a small part of the beginning or nothing from the beginning, but all from the last sessions? So sample validity is to make sure that it is sampling, it is taking questions from all aspects of that area of study. Now this is usually going to be done for you by an expert in the area. So once you have designed your questions, you take it to an expert in the field and you say, do you think I have adequately addressed all areas of the study? And that person can give you ideas. Maybe you missed out a little bit on this one, on that one, and you can adjust it. So this is sampling validity. It is to make sure that you are taking questions, you are addressing questions to cover the whole aspect of your study, of course, within the boundaries you have set for your study. Reliability, this is the degree to which the instrument consistently measures whatever it is measuring. This is repeatability, if that's a word. Can you repeat it? Can you repeat it consistently? Can it give the same result consistently? The more reliability the test has, the more confidence we can have that the scores obtained from the test are essentially the same scores that would be obtained if the tests were re-administered to the same test takers. So if I gave my instrument to this group of people last week and they gave me the results, and after 2 weeks, if I give them the same questions to the same group of people under the same circumstances, would the results be the same? So that is the idea of reliability. Would it give me the same results consistently? Okay. Reliability is expressed numerically. Usually they will say if a valid test is always reliable. A valid test is always reliable, but a reliable test is not always valid, because validity has to do with, does it cover the contents sufficiently, adequately, properly? Do the questions relate with that? If it is valid, then it could be repeated. It could be repeated, and therefore it is reliable mostly. But a reliable one is not necessarily valid. Just because it can give us the same results consistently, it doesn't mean the instrument itself is valid. It doesn't mean the instrument is, for example, addressing all aspects of the study area. Or it doesn't mean that the questions in the instrument are all related to the topic of your study. Okay? So the fact that it consistently gives you the same results doesn't mean it will be valid. But the other way is true. A valid instrument is mostly reliable. So an instrument may measure something consistently, but it may be measuring the wrong thing and therefore be invalid. Now, types of reliability: stability or test result, test retest, equivalence, internal consistency. These are the different ones. Let me look at the stability or test retest one. This one is simple. So what you want to do is reliability. That means, does it give me the same results consistently? So test, retest. The name itself can tell you. You will test and then you will retest. So degree to which the scores on the same test are consistent over time. So administer the test to an appropriate group. After some time has passed, say after 2 weeks, administer the same test to the same group of people, and then you do a correlation. There's something called correlational tests that you can do. Then you correlate the two sets of scores, evaluate the results, and then the higher the correlation coefficient indicates high stability or reliability there. Okay, so you test it. So you can take a group of people. This could be a part of your pilot test. So you test it with a group of people, and after some time you retest again, and then you correlate the two of them, and then you have the correlation coefficient, which will tell you the level of reliability the instrument has. The higher that coefficient, the higher the correlation, you have a higher reliability there. Internal consistency reliability. Internal consistency reliability is the extent to which items in a single test are consistent among themselves and with the test as a whole. You have questions within the instrument. To what extent are they related, and to what extent are each questions related to the whole instrument that you have? This is internal consistency reliability. When a test's items are measuring similar things, they are internally consistent. So are they internally consistent? Are they related with each other? The idea is measuring similar things, internally consistent. And for this, what they use is this thing called Cronbach alpha. This is the statistics that will be used to estimate the internal consistency reliability by determining how all items on a test relate to all other test items and to the total test. This is usually what you do is, again, during the pilot test, you give it to a group of people and you will see the results, and you take those results, and SPSS, even simple Excel, will calculate the Cronbach alpha for you. So you want this one to be relatively high, 0.7 and up should be the result for this one, to show that it is internally consistent. Okay, So those are basically the main things with regards to the validity and reliability, and you usually use it with quantitative studies. So when constructing your own instrument, ensure you pilot test your instrument and test for validity and reliability. Blessings.